In the heart of a deep forest, just behind a village, there was a small kingdom filled with fairies. These fluttering fairies lived in tiny houses they built for themselves, using the gifts of the earth. Some resided in the hollowed-out parts of tree trunks, while others crafted homes from large, thick leaves. Some fairies even borrowed holes in the ground like little moles. They were protected by the trees that sheltered them and the earth that cherished them. Yet the fairies were creatures of Mother Nature, tasked with the responsibility of safeguarding the land. They healed and nourished the trees and enriched the soil. And in return, Mother Nature kept them hidden from the curious eyes of nearby humans. The villagers had heard tales of the fairies and longed to catch a glimpse of them. But the trees formed a barrier between the village and the guardian fairies. Whenever a human ventured too close, the branches would often tickle their heads or sway across their path, blocking the way. Sometimes the paths themselves would confuse people by shifting entirely. The fairies needed to remain hidden to perform their duties and live peacefully in their homes. Every few years, someone would slip through the cracks, often by chance, coincidence, or fate. One autumn afternoon not so long ago was one of those days when the woods decided to welcome a guest. The air was charged with something in its cool breeze, while the clouds hung in a misty gray, attempting to conceal the sun. Yet its beams still shone through the gaps, making the dewdrops sparkle on the amber leaves. A girl named Evie was walking down a path illuminated by a single sunbeam. She loved autumn. As she strolled through the woods, she admired her surroundings, inhaling the scent of pine needles and damp leaves, smiling as the earth crunched beneath her feet. It was sensory magic, something she had described in a conversation with her mother before setting out for her afternoon walk. Everything about autumn delighted her senses. From the crunch of the leaves to the beautiful colors of the trees, she looked up at the canopy of leaves above her, which appeared as though the trees had been set ablaze with vibrant colors. The gray skies didn't matter. Nay, the trees still shone with all their magic and color. Evie barely noticed which direction she was heading. She couldn't help but admire the beauty around her. The trees felt her adoration and warmth, appreciating the love radiating from her heart. They allowed her to pass, even as she approached the secret part of the woods. The branches didn't reach out to trip her or tickle her neck. Instead, they permitted her to continue walking. As Evie gazed at the world around her, she hardly glanced at the path beneath her feet. Evie was walking along a path when she realized it had unexpectedly changed direction to the left. She was unaware that the landscape had transformed. The grass and fallen leaves were gone. Continuing her walk, she noticed the crunching sound underfoot had been replaced by the tapping of her shoes against stone. Looking down, she discovered the dirt trail, once surrounded by lush greenery, was now a cobblestone walkway lined with red maple trees and shrubs. Faced with no choice but to either turn back or follow the new path, Evie glanced behind her, but could only see green grass and towering trees. She paused to think, wishing for guidance, perhaps the North Star to appear, contemplating turning back to find her way through the woods. She felt an inexplicable pull toward the cobblestone path. Excitement bubbled in her chest as she stepped onto the stones, each footfall cautious yet filled with curiosity. She was intrigued by where the path might lead, but soon she heard a scuttling noise. Initially thinking it was a small animal, until she sensed it was something more magical, though Evie had long since dismissed magic as mere fantasy after her childhood experiences. she found herself gazing at a tiny green figure, no larger than her finger, with fluttering wings. Doubting her perception, she hoped to wake up at home, but was instead met with the earthy sense of the woods around her. Tentatively opening her eyes, she was startled and stumbled back, only to be caught by a long branch from a red maple tree just in time. Grateful yet bewildered, Evie thanked the tree, which waved its branch as if to say it was nothing. The scene felt surreal, reminiscent of Alice's adventures in Wonderland. Rubbing her eyes, she turned her gaze back to her astonishment. Several small, multicolored winged beings flew before her. The fairies, intrigued by her presence, regarded her with curiosity. They hadn't seen a human visitor in years, and despite their concern about how she got in, they sensed something special about her arrival, as if fate had guided her to their hidden village in the woods. Evie found herself being gently pulled along a cobblestone path by a group of cheerful fairies, their small hands wrapped around her fingers and clothing. With smiles lighting their faces, they coaxed her further down the path, making her feel like an unwitting participant in a delightful dream. Though she could have easily brushed them off and turned back home, curiosity lingered, compelling her to follow. She reluctantly moved forward, guided by the fairies, unsure of what lay ahead. But intrigued by the enchanting world of fairies and moving trees she had briefly discovered. As she walked, the path's end gradually came into sight, revealing two delicate willow trees with soft, curved branches that created a curtain of vibrant green leaves, shielding whatever was hidden behind. For a moment, Evie paused, contemplating what could be waiting beyond perhaps ogres, trolls, or wizards. But before she could linger on her thoughts, the willow trees seemed to sense her presence and gracefully parted, unveiling a scene that felt ripped from a fairy tale. In her own world, autumn was in full swing, but stepping beyond the willows, she was enveloped by a summer warmth that flooded her senses, reminding her of the comfort and familiarity of her grandmother's knitted hat and scarf. Before her lay a quaint village, the smallest she had ever seen, with the entrance bathed in a warm, glowing light. The tickling leaves brushed against Evie's cheeks as she made her way through, followed by the fairies who flitted down into the village filled with charming little homes. Evie looked up at the bright blue sky dotted with fluffy white clouds, feeling the sun's rays wrap around her like a cozy hug. The cobbled path meandered onward, centering the town, where a single tall building stood, though it would only reach her waist. This cream-colored stone structure seemed timeless, standing strong as if it had been there for ages. It bore a large clock that caught Evie's attention. Tea time was approaching, and she realized she should have headed back long before now. A group of fairies stood by the clock, carrying items they'd collected from the wood's acorns and vibrant autumn leaves. As Evie neared, they all turned to her wide-eyed, some even dropping their treasures. She felt a weight of uncertainty as she hesitated on the edge of this tiny village. That night, Evie's dreams were not like the usual ones that faded when morning came. She found herself once again on the cobblestone path, the red maples swaying above her as if whispering secrets. The air shimmered with golden motes, and the same yellow-dressed fairy from earlier hovered ahead of her, smiling knowingly. "Tomorrow," the fairy said softly, her voice like wind chimes in the breeze, but not alone. Before Evie could ask what she meant, a deep, distant rumble echoed through the dream. The cobblestone beneath her feet began to crack, light spilling through the gaps. Evie tried to reach for the fairy, but the vision dissolved into darkness. She woke with a start, her room bathed in the silver glow of moonlight. The sound of the rumble seemed to linger in her ears, fading only after she sat up and took a deep breath. The next morning, Evie could still recall the dream with perfect clarity. She dressed quickly, thinking about the words the fairy had spoken, not alone. Who could possibly come with her, and why? Her mind was buzzing as she walked into the kitchen, where her mother was sipping tea by the window. Outside, the sky was streaked with pinks and golds, and the scent of wet leaves drifted in from the open window. "Sleep well?" her mother asked without looking up. Evie hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, just had a strange dream." Her mother finally turned toward her, a curious look in her eyes. "The woods again." Evie froze. "What do you mean again?" Again her mother smiled faintly, almost sadly. "I used to dream of them when I was your age. Cobblestones, fairies, moving trees, and but dreams fade." As she paused, the woods decide otherwise. Evie's heartbeat quickened. "Did you ever?" she began. But her mother was already standing, walking toward the pantry. "No more questions now," she said briskly, though her voice was gentler than her words. "Eat something. If you're going for a walk today, you might not want to go alone." Evie stared at her, remembering the fairy's words. Not alone. That's when she thought of Liam, her closest friend from the village. The only person who might believe her if she told him the truth. The only one curious enough to follow her into the heart of the woods. She didn't know it yet, but their second journey into the forest would be nothing like the first. The fairies were waiting, so was something else. By mid-morning, Evie had made up her mind. She slipped on her boots, stuffed a scarf into her bag, and crossed the village square toward Liam's house. Liam was sitting on the front steps, tinkering with a pocket watch that looked older than both of them combined. He glanced up when he saw her. "Early," he said, "and you've got that look again." "What look?" "Yeah. I found something weird, and you're going to come with me whether you like it or not." "Look," Evie smiled despite herself. "Then you already know what I'm here for." Liam narrowed his eyes playfully, but Evie could tell he was intrigued. He always was. "All right," he said, standing and pocketing the watch. "Lead the way, troublemaker." They set off toward the woods. The air was crisp and full of autumn scents, and Evie's excitement grew with every step. But as they reached the first line of trees, she slowed. The forest looked different, darker somehow, as if the shadows were heavier today. "Are we supposed to just walk in?" Liam asked, glancing up at the twisting branches. "Yes," Evie said, though her voice wavered. She started down the familiar dirt path, glancing at the leaves above as if expecting them to move again. For a while, everything was ordinary. The ground was soft with pine needles, birds flitted overhead, and Liam occasionally asked questions she avoided answering. Then, without warning, the path veered left, just as it had before, and the cobblestone appeared beneath their feet. "Whoa," Liam whispered. How does that happen?" "I don't know," Evie admitted. "But last time, the fairies were waiting." Fairies. Liam's voice rose in disbelief, but he didn't stop walking. "Evie, if this is some elaborate prank," he cut himself off. Up ahead, a small shape darted across the path, wings flashing in the sunlight. That, Evie said quietly, was not a squirrel. The fairies were watching them now, their tiny faces unreadable. A few fluttered closer, their wings whispering in the air. But something in their movement was different, hesitant, almost. "Guarded? They don't seem happy to see us," Liam murmured. Evie noticed it too. The last time she had been here, the fairies had smiled and tugged her along. Today, they hovered in a loose half-circle, blocking the path deeper into the woods. One of them, not the yellow-dressed fairy from before, but a smaller one with pale blue wings, finally spoke. "You shouldn't have brought him," she said, her voice barely louder than the rustle of leaves. Before Evie could respond, the yellow-dressed fairy appeared behind them, her expression serious. "The trees let you through again," she said to Evie, "but this time, they're warning us." Liam glanced between them. "Warning you about what?" The yellow fairy's gaze moved past them, toward the darker part of the forest where the cobblestones vanished into shadow. "Wake?" she whispered. Liam frowned. "It's awake!" "What's awake?" The yellow-dressed fairy hovered closer, her wings stirring Evie's hair like a warm breeze. "Something older than the fairies. Older than the trees that guard this place. Stirs only when the balance is broken." Evie's pulse quickened. "What kind of balance?" "The one between the seen and the unseen," the fairy replied. "Too many eyes from your world, and the old thing remembers we exist." She glanced at Liam, and Evie realized with a jolt that he was in Tej as an unexpected guest. To the fairies, he might be the tipping point. From the shadowed part of the forest came a low, rhythmic sound, like a slow drumbeat. The fairies stilled midair. Even the leaves stopped rustling. "That's not wind," Liam whispered. The yellow fairy darted to Evie's shoulder, gripping the fabric of her coat. "You must leave, both of you." "What?" "But I just got here," Liam protested. "And you may never leave if you don't go now," she said sharply. Golden like drops of honey, held none of the earlier kindness Evie remembered from her first visit. "The path will not stay open for long." Ivy hesitated. The drumbeat was louder now, joined by a deep vibration under her boots. It reminded her of the rumble from her dream. The cracks in the cobblestones spilling light. The yellow fairy leaned close to Evie's ear. "If it sees you, it will follow you home." A sudden wind roared through the maples, their branches bending as if something massive was pushing through the forest toward them. The fairies scattered, streaks of color vanishing into the trees. "Evie, we have to go." Liam grabbed her wrist. The cobblestones beneath them flickered like they were struggling to stay solid. They ran. Behind them, the air seemed to twist and warp, bending the light. Through the corner of her eye, Evie thought she saw it. Something huge and shapeless, darker than shadow, with eyes like faint embers in the mist. The trees moved to block it, their branches slamming down like gates. The ground pitched beneath Evie's feet, and then they burst out onto the dirt path. The cobblestones were gone. The air was still. Liam doubled over, breathing hard. "What? What was that?" Evie didn't answer. Her gaze was locked on the line of trees behind them. The forest was silent, but she could still feel the heat of those ember eyes on her skin. The yellow fairy's voice echoed faintly in her mind, as if carried by the last trace of wind. "It knows you now." That night, Evie couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the ember-like glow of its eyes burning through the dark. She rolled over again and again until the moonlight spilling through her curtains shifted into the pale gray of dawn. By morning, she had almost convinced herself it had all been a trick of the light, a shadow, dream still clinging to her mind. But when she stepped outside, the air felt wrong. The village was quiet, not just early morning quiet, but hollow. No birds sang from the rooftops, no dogs barked in distant yards. It was as if sound itself was holding its breath. Liam was waiting for her at the well in the center of the square, hands shoved deep in his coat pockets. He looked pale, and there were dark smudges under his eyes. He didn't sleep either, she said. He shook his head. I kept hearing, I don't know, hum, a heartbeat, like it was coming from the ground. Evie shivered. He felt it too. They both turned as the blacksmith's wife crossed the square, but she didn't glance at them. Her eyes were fixed ahead, and she walked stiffly, as though every step was careful. A few feet later, she paused and looked over her shoulder, not at them but toward the woods. Evie followed her gaze. The tree line stood still in the distance, dark and dense. But for the briefest moment, she thought she saw a shadow shift against the light of morning. Something huge, crouched low, then gone. The yellow fairy's warning came back to her with a sting. If it sees you, it will follow you home. That evening, Evie stayed inside, pretending to read while the wind pressed softly against the windows. Her mother moved about the kitchen, humming a tune she'd never heard before, slow, almost mournful. When Evie asked what it was, her mother paused mid-note. An old song my grandmother used to sing, she said, her voice quieter now. She said it was for keeping things away from the door. Evie's stomach tightened. What kind of things? Her mother met her gaze for a long moment. The ones that slip through when the trees are distracted. Before Evie could respond, a faint thump came from outside, not at the door, but from the side of the house, low to the ground. Her mother's face drained of color. Evie, she said, her voice tight, close the curtains, and do not, under any circumstance, look out the window. Evie's hands trembled as she reached for the curtains. The faint thumping came again, slow, deliberate, as if whatever was outside wanted them to know it was there. Her mother stood frozen by the kitchen table, eyes locked on the wall where the sound came from. She wasn't humming anymore. Evie, she repeated, don't look. But curiosity burned hot in Evie's chest. She inched toward the window, her fingers gripping the curtain's edge. If it had followed her here, she had to know what it looked like. What had been moving through the trees? What had stared at her with ember eyes? The sound shifted. A long, slow drag of something heavy across the side of the house. She pulled the curtain back just an inch. At first, she saw nothing, just the pale sliver of moonlight falling across the yard. Then her eyes adjusted, and she saw movement in the shadow of the fence. It was taller than the fence, hunched and wrong in shape, its limbs bending in ways that made her stomach knot. The moonlight caught its face, or what should have been a face, and she saw two faint glowing embers watching her directly. The moment their eyes met, the thing moved, not toward her, but into the earth. It sank without a sound, as if the ground swallowed it whole, leaving nothing but undisturbed frost. Evie's breath came fast and shallow. You looked, her mother said quietly from behind her. It wasn't a question. Evie turned. What is it? Her mother hesitated, then walked to the shelf above the hearth. She took down a small wooden box carved with curling vines and leaf patterns. Inside, wrapped in faded cloth, was a smooth black stone that seemed to absorb the light around it. It's called the Hollow, her mother said, and if it's taken an interest in you, you don't have much time. Her mother wrapped it back in the cloth before she spoke again. The Hollow was never meant to wake. The trees and the fairies keep it bound beneath the forest floor, deeper than any roots. But if the balance between our world and theirs is disturbed, She glanced sharply at Evie. The hollow remembers the way out. Evie swallowed hard. You've seen it before? Her mother's eyes darkened. Once, I was about your age. I went too far into the woods and the trees let me pass. When I came back, it followed. I thought I'd lost it, but she broke off, shaking her head. It took your grandmother the next winter. She disappeared without a sound. No tracks, no struggle. It was gone. The room felt colder. But why me? Evie asked. Why now? Her mother's voice softened. Because you were meant to see the fairies. And because you brought someone else. That kind of crossing wakes old things. Evie thought of Liam, of his pale face in the square that morning, and the way he'd heard the same heartbeat beneath the ground. Then it's after both of us. Yes, her mother said. And the only way to stop it is to send it back before the moon turns full. Evie's gaze flicked to the window where the pale light of the almost drowned moon hung heavy in the sky. That's in 3 nights. Mother nodded once. You'll need help from the fairies. The hollow can't be fought. It can only be led back through the trees to the place it came from. Evie took a breath, her mind already racing ahead. Then I have to go back. Tonight. Her mother hesitated, then slid the wrapped stone across the table toward her. Take this. The hollow can't cross it. Keep it close. Outside, the wind had started to rise, rattling the bare branches in the yard. Somewhere beyond the village, in the black shape of the forest, something answered the wind with a low, hollow hum. A sound that made Evie's bones ache. By the time Evie reached Liam's house, the wind had picked up enough to sting her cheeks. She rapped on the side door, her breath clouding in the air. Liam appeared almost immediately, like he'd been waiting. His coat was already on, and his face was pale. You saw it, didn't you? He said. Evie just nodded. It's called the Hollow. My mom says it's after both of us. For a moment he didn't move, then he stepped outside, shutting the door quietly behind him. Good, I'd rather know what's hunting me than pretend it's not there. They set off toward the forest, the snow crunching under their boots. The moon rode high, almost full, its pale light turning the frost into a shimmer. Each gust of wind made the branches clack together, a sound too close to bones for comfort. Halfway down the path, Liam spoke again. What's the plan? Find the fairies. Make them help us. Evie clutched the wrapped stone in her pocket. My mom says they're the ones who keep the hollow trapped. The forest loomed closer, a wall of black trunks and frost-white limbs. When they crossed the first line of trees, Evie felt the air change. It was warmer, but heavier, like breathing underwater. The heartbeat she'd felt before thrummed faintly in her ears. The fairies didn't make them wait this time. A scatter of pale blue lights appeared between the trees, moving fast, circling them like moths. Liam tensed. They know why we're here, Evie whispered. One of the lights drifted close enough to touch. When it spoke, it was in both their heads at once. The hollow walks. You have little time. Liam stepped forward. Then tell us how to stop it. The fairy light flickered, lit it to the black root. The ground will take it back. You must reach it before the moon is full, or it will not follow. It will choose. Evie's stomach tightened. Choose what? The lights dimmed. Which one of you at once? The wind surged through the trees, carrying with it a sound like something dragging itself through the snow. Closer than it should be. The dragging sound grew louder, wet, uneven, like something pulling itself forward on limbs that didn't bend right. Liam's eyes widened. That's it, isn't it? Evie didn't answer. She grabbed his wrist and yanked him toward the deeper woods. The fairy lights darted ahead, weaving between trees in a frantic, zigzagging path. Behind them, the hollow's shape began to take form in the moonlight. A tall, hunched figure, its edges frayed and shifting like smoke, but with a darkness so solid it seemed to eat the light around it. Where its face should have been, there was only a void. They ran. Roots clawed at their boots, branches tore at their sleeves. The heartbeat in Evie's ears was no longer just hers. It was heavier now, echoing in the ground, shaking the frost from the branches above. Left a voice shouted inside her head, one of the fairies. They veered sharply, skidding through a narrow gap between two leaning pines. The hollow followed without sound, didn't push the trees aside. The trees seemed to bend away from it. Evie's lungs burned, but the thought of slowing down was worse. "Where's the black root?" she gasped. The fairy lights flashed urgently. "Past the river. I must cross where it is thin." A sudden smell hit Evie's nose, cold iron and rot like wet earth left to fester. Liam coughed, covering his face. "Don't breathe it in," Evie hissed. The thing was closer now. She could hear its movements more clearly, the scrape of something hard against stone, the faint tearing sound of frozen earth breaking under a natural weight. They burst into a clearing. The river lay ahead, narrow but fast, ice forming in jagged plates along the edges. "Jump," Evie shouted. Liam didn't hesitate. He leaped, landing hard on the other side, slipping but catching himself. Evie followed, nearly falling as her boots hit the frozen bank. When she turned back, she saw the hollow stop at the edge of the water. For a second, she thought, maybe it can't cross. Then it stepped forward. The ice didn't break under its weight, simply sank into it, vanishing beneath the surface without a ripple. Liam's voice cracked. "It's under us." The river's flow quickened, the ice trembling beneath their feet. The river ice buckled with a sharp, splintering crack. Evie shoved Liam forward. "Run now." They scrambled up the opposite bank, just as a black, glistening hand burst through the ice behind them. It was too long, with jointed fingers that bent backward, each tipped with something like nails, but jagged as broken glass. The thing didn't pull itself fully out. It slid through the water, its shadow twisting beneath the surface, like a predator pacing below. The fairies darted ahead, but slower now, as if the path they were taking wasn't their first choice. The blue lights trembled. "This way is not safe. Older things live here." Liam shot them a look. "Older than that?" No answer. Just a deepening silence. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. The trees here were different, thicker, their bark warped and knotted, with roots that rose above the ground in loops big enough to crawl through. The air smelled like wet stone and old ash. Evie realized they weren't just running forward anymore. They were going downhill. The ground sloped gently at first, then steeper, until it felt like they were being pulled into the earth. Ahead, a black archway formed by the roots of an ancient oak loomed, big enough for 3 people to walk through side by side. The space beyond it was darker than night, the kind of dark that swallowed even the fairy light. One of the lights hovered near her shoulder. "The black root is beyond, but it will test you." A low rumble vibrated under their feet. Not footsteps, but something moving through the soil. Liam glanced behind them, then forward. "We don't have a choice, do we?" "No," Evie said. We really don't. They stepped under the arch. The darkness inside was alive. The air inside the arch clung to their skin, thick and damp like they'd stepped under water. The fairy lights didn't follow. They stopped at the threshold, shivering in place. Evie's voice was barely above a whisper. Guess we're on our own now. The ground felt soft under her boots, but when she glanced down, it wasn't dirt. It was a mat of pale roots, winding and curling around each other like snakes, pulsing faintly as if something flowed through them. Single voice, deep, old, and neither male nor female, echoed inside her skull. You seek the root, but you do not bring offerings. Evie swallowed. I bring the hollow. A pause. Then the hollow is hunger. What are you? Before she could answer, the space shifted. The oak roots unfurled upward into a ceiling, then twisted into walls. A tunnel formed, lit by no light, yet visible in every detail. At the far end, she saw a scene she knew too well. Her childhood home exactly as it looked the night her mother never came back. Liam took a step back. Evie, it's showing me don't say it, she snapped. Don't give it anything. The voice returned, closer now, as though the black root itself were breathing against her ear. I feed on truth. You may pass only if you survive your own. The tunnel split into two paths, one leading toward her memory, the other toward Liam's. Both pulsed with that same root light, throbbing like veins. The ground quivered. From somewhere deep below, she heard the scrape of the hollow moving closer, its sound now inside the root's domain. Liam's voice was tight. It's coming, what do we do? Evie's jaw set. We take the trials. Both of them. They split. As she stepped into her side of the tunnel, the air grew warmer, heavy with the smell of burnt wood. The floor beneath her feet felt brittle now. Root turned to charcoal. From somewhere ahead, she heard a faint tapping, like fingernails against glass. The tapping grew louder. Tap, tap, a pause, then a long, slow scrape. Evie's chest tightened. She knew this sound, not from memory, but from instinct, the way prey knows the sound of its predator. The tunnel widened into a perfect replica of her old living room, only wrong in small ways. The wallpaper was slightly peeled, the TV dark and reflecting nothing, and the corners of the room seemed too deep, as if they could keep going forever. On the couch sat her mother. Not her real mother. The smile was too fixed, the eyes too still. She was knitting something from thin black strands that writhed on their own, wriggling as they were woven. Evie, the figure said softly, you've come home. The hollow's shadow moved along the walls, stretching impossibly long. It wasn't here yet, not fully, but it had seeped into the trial, wearing her mother's voice like a mask. Evie kept her gaze steady. You're not her? The figure tilted its head, the knitting needles clicking faster. But I can be. If you give me the name of the one who will take your place. She didn't answer. She couldn't. Names had weight here. The root floor shifted beneath her feet, like it was bristling. The black root's voice echoed again, sharper this time. The hollow poisons the test. You must cut it out. From the knitting, a shape began to form. Something small, child-sized. Its skin made of that same writhing black thread. The thing turned its head toward her and smiled with too many teeth. Her hand went to the hunting knife at her belt. Behind her, she could hear Liam shouting from his side of the tunnel, and then a sound like rushing water and breaking stone. The hollow was pushing through both trials at once. Evie stepped forward, blade low. All right, let's see if you bleed. The thing in the black thread skin lunged. It didn't run like a child. It darted forward in a jagged, insect-like burst, limbs bending wrong. Evie sidestepped, slashing low. The blade bit into its leg, but instead of blood, thick strands of thread burst out, snaking toward her wrist. She yanked back before they could wrap around her. The false mother's voice followed her. Careful, Evie. Every cut unravels what you are. She glanced at the leg she'd slashed. The wound wasn't healing, but the living room around her was. The peeling wallpaper straightened. The colors in the rug brightened. And in the corner of her vision, a photo frame on the shelf went blank. Its image gone forever. Root's voice hissed in her head. To harm the hollow here, you must feed me your memories. Do you pay? The thing lunged again, this time going for her throat. She blocked with her forearm and drove the knife upward, deep into its chest. The moment she did, the whole scene shivered. The couch vanished, the TV dissolved, and another photo from the wall went white. She felt the loss like a cold stab in her ribs. She no longer remembered the exact sound of her mother's laugh. The hollow screamed, not from pain, but from anger, and its form collapsed into a storm of threads whipping through the air. They lashed at the root walls, tearing holes that bled black fog. Through one of those rips, Evie saw Liam. He was knee-deep in black water, wrestling something with too many arms. His eyes locked on hers across the breach. "Whatever you're doing," he shouted, his voice muffled through the fog. "Do it faster," the false mother's voice whispered again, now from everywhere. "You can end this. Just give me his name." Evie tightened her grip on the knife. She had one last memory she knew the hollow wanted, and giving it up might tear a hole big enough for them both to escape. Evie's pulse hammered in her ears. The hollow's threads whipped around her, tasting the air like hungry snakes. Each one hummed with a pull. A whisper. "Just give me the name." Her knife felt heavier now, the handle slick with her own sweat. She thought of the memory it wanted. The first night she'd met Liam, the moment they'd stopped being strangers. Rain on the tin roof, the smell of wet asphalt, the way he'd handed her a steaming cup of tea without asking a single question. Losing that would be like losing the reason she'd survived this long. The Black Root's voice pressed harder, ancient and sharp. "You cannot fight it whole. Feed me what it craves and I will tear it apart." The threads closed in. The false mother stepped closer, knitting needles vanishing into her palms as her hands became claws of woven shadow. Evie made her choice. She drove the knife into her own palm, hard enough to draw blood. The pain ripped through the memory, tearing it loose. She felt the night with Liam slip from her mind, faces blurring, voices fading. The air seemed to thin, and then the root reacted. The ground cracked open, sending up a roar like 1,000 trees being ripped from the earth. The threads screamed as the root's walls tore apart, widening the breach between her world and Liam's. She didn't hesitate. Evie hurled herself through the gap, grabbed Liam's arm mid-struggle, and yanked him out of the black water. The breach slammed shut behind them with a sound like an axe into wood. The hollow's voice echoed one last time, a promise, not a threat. "You've left a piece of yourself in my hands, little hunter. I will use it." Evie staggered to her feet, chest heaving. She looked at Liam, ready to explain what she'd done. but his face showed nothing but polite confusion. "Do I know you?" he asked. Evie froze. The words cut deeper than any blade the hollow could conjure. She had prepared herself to forget, to carry the empty space where that night used to live. She hadn't prepared for him to forget, too. "It's me," she said quickly, voice trembling despite herself. "It's Evie. We've been..." She stopped. She didn't know where to begin. Liam's grip tightened on the jagged spear he'd been using in the water. His eyes scanned her face, searching for something to anchor to, but there was nothing there for him anymore. The root's voice pulsed faintly under her skin, 2 threads severed with one cut. "We are bound tighter now." Evie stepped back, the weight of that realization sinking in. If the hollow held their shared memory, it wasn't gone. It was somewhere. And if it could feed on it, it could find them. She glanced over her shoulder. They were no longer in the root chamber, though the ground was hard and ashen, the sky above shifting like oil and water. Not home, but not the hollow's den either. In between space. Liam frowned, lowering his weapon slightly. "You pulled me out, didn't you? From whatever that was." "Yes, then I'll trust you. For now." The words should have been a relief, but they only twisted the knife. Sound broke the heavy silence, a faint clicking, like knitting needles tapping together. Evie turned sharply, spotting something on the horizon. Lone figure hunched, walking toward them. Its head was bowed, and from this distance, it almost looked like a harmless old woman. Almost. The root whispered again, urgent this time. "It's not hunting you, it's carrying your memory." Evie's chest tightened. She let that figure vanish into the between. She might never get it back, and the hollow would know everything. Evie didn't wait for Liam to agree. She ran. The ashen ground shifted beneath her boots, turning soft and springy like peat moss, then brittle like cracked glass. The between was restless, rippling with each step. The figure ahead didn't run, but every time she blinked, it seemed farther away. Evie. Liam's voice was close behind, boots crunching, breath ragged. "What the hell is that?" She didn't answer. She couldn't. Explaining meant slowing down, and slowing down meant losing it. The clicking grew louder, rhythmic, precise like a clock that never missed a beat. The air smelled faintly of scorched wool. The figure's back twitched as if it sensed their pursuit. Didn't turn. Instead, it folded. Its spine bent at impossible angles, clothes wrinkling into new shapes, and when it straightened again, its arms were longer. Fingers trailing thin black threads across the ground. The root hissed in her mind. Catch it before it spins the memory into the weave. After that, you'll never cut it free. Liam's voice was sharper now, closer to panic. "Evie, talk to me, what's it carrying?" She caught herself. Our memory. He didn't ask how, just ran harder. The landscape warped as they closed in. The sky bled into molten orange. The ground stretched into strips, as though it were a carpet being pulled away under their feet. The figure's threadwork spread like a spider's web, glistening in the strange light, forcing them to jump and weave through gaps. Finally, they were close enough for Evie to smell it. Not just the wool, but something sweeter, more poisonous, like sap dripping from a tree that should be long dead. Liam lunged, grabbing one of the trailing threads. The figure stopped abruptly. Slowly it turned. Its face was stitched together from scraps, a smile from one mouth, eyes from another, and between them all, something that looked like her mother's gaze. "Give it back," Evie growled, knife ready. The figure tilted its head. When it spoke, it was in Liam's voice from that forgotten night. "Do I know you?" Evie's grip on the knife tightened until her knuckles turned white. Her pulse pounded in her ears, drowning out the rhythmic clicking. The figure stood perfectly still now, the black threads in its hands swaying gently like they were underwater. "Give it back," she repeated, stepping closer. The stitched mouth widened, pulling at seams that shouldn't stretch. "It's not yours anymore," it said, this time in her own voice. The roots snarled in her mind. "Don't argue. Cut the weave before it anchors. Every second you waste, the memory roots deeper into its skin." Liam moved to her side, spear raised. "You're telling me that thing has my memories too?" Evie didn't look at him. Not yet. But if it finishes weaving, it will. The figure's long fingers twitched, snapping 2 strands taut. The air between them shimmered, and images began to flicker in the threads. A broken street lamp in the rain, a glass bottle rolling across cobblestones, and 2 silhouettes standing too close beneath a single umbrella. Liam's jaw tightened. "I know that place." "That's the night," Evie said, voice low. "The hollow's keeping it here." She didn't wait for him to react. She lunged. Her blade sliced toward the figure's arm. But the moment the steel touched the black thread, the between screamed. The ground buckled, throwing her off balance. The figure didn't flinch. Instead, it darted backward with inhuman speed, threads pulling taut until they sang in the air. Liam charged from the side, thrusting the spear, but the figure bent unnaturally again, body folding at the waist until its head was level with its knees. It swept a hand in a wide arc, and the threads lashed like whips. One caught Liam's arm, and in that instant his eyes glazed over. Evie caught him before he fell. His voice was distant, dreamlike. "I don't know you." Her stomach dropped. The figure laughed softly, a dozen voices at once. Every thread it wove was stealing pieces of them, one by one. The root's voice roared in her mind. "Sever the spindle." Why were all threads meet? The heart of the loom. Evie's gaze darted to the figure's chest. Beneath the patchwork skin, something pulsed faintly. Not a heart, but a tangled knot of glowing strands. She tightened her grip on the knife. The figure saw her look, and its stitched smile turned sharp. It hurled a wave of threads toward her, each one flashing with images she couldn't bear to lose. Her brother's laugh, her first stolen kiss, the sound of her mother calling her name. Evie screamed and ran straight through them. Threads sliced across her skin, each cut cold as ice, each one leaving a hollowness behind. She didn't stop. She drove the knife forward, burying it into the glowing knot. The between erupted. The sky tore open, spilling light and shadow in equal measure. The ground shattered, flinging them all into a storm of fractured memories. Hundreds of voices, places, smells, all tangled together. The figure shrieked, the sound cracking like splintering glass. Its body unraveled, the threads whipping away into the void, until only a single strand remained. And in that strand, Evie saw them, standing under that broken street lamp, laughing as rain poured down. She grabbed it. The moment her fingers closed around the memory, the storm collapsed. They landed hard on solid ground. The air was damp, heavy, and real. Liam groaned beside her, clutching his head. His eyes found hers, confusion fading into recognition. "Evie," she smiled faintly. Took you long enough. But before either of them could breathe in relief, the root whispered one last time, almost amused. You've taken back what was yours, and now the hollow will come for it. The relief in Liam's face lasted less than a heartbeat. A sound rolled across the damp air. Low at first, like distant thunder, then rising until it became a deep, resonant thump-thump, each pulse shaking the ground. Evie's head snapped toward the tree line. Shadows weren't supposed to move like that. Between the twisted birches, darkness thickened into something solid, pushing between the trunks like liquid night. It had no clear shape at first, just a mass of shifting black. But as it spilled closer, it began to form edges. Long, jagged limbs, a spiked ridge down its back, and a face that was nothing but a gaping hollow circle rimmed with faint teeth. The hollow. Liam scrambled to his feet, spear in hand. That's I know, Evie cut him off, already moving. Don't let it breathe on you. The root's voice came in sharp, urgent bursts. Its breath isn't air. It's absence. If it touches you, you'll forget your own name before you hit the ground. The hollow lurched forward, each step bending the earth beneath it. It exhaled, and the mist it released didn't just obscure the trees, it erased them. Where the fog touched, the world simply stopped existing. Liam swore under his breath. We can't outrun that. Then we don't run, Evie said, eyes fixed on the creature's core. A faint, dyed trembling light deep inside the circular void of its face. The hollow let out a guttural moan that made the inside of her skull ache. The world around them dimmed as if all the color was being pulled inward. Evie drew the knife again, the same blade that had cut the spindle. The metal hummed faintly, like it remembered what it had done. The hollow struck first. Its arm shot forward, not like a limb, but like a spear of shadow. Stabbing toward Liam, he blocked with the shaft of his spear, but the wood groaned under the force. Evie darted to the side, boots slipping on wet leaves, and slashed at its flank. The blade cut deep, but instead of blood, the wound poured more of that erasing mist. The edge of it grazed her sleeve. She yanked her arm back, and her mind went blank for a split second, like a page torn from a book. She shook it off, gritting her teeth. Liam aimed for the core, adjusted his grip, feinting left before thrusting straight into the hollow's face. The spear sank an inch into the light within, but the hollow's scream knocked him back like a wave. It turned on Evie. She barely had time to breathe before its breath came for her. The hollow's breath spilled toward her like a living tide of night. Evie dove sideways, shoulders slamming into a root as the mist swept past, and the space she had been in vanished. Not destroyed, not broken, simply gone. Her lungs burned. Not from running, but from the weight pressing on the air. The root's voice thundered in her skull. Do not let it close the ring. The circle completes, the hollow will anchor here. Circle, she gasped, but then she saw it. The tendrils of mist weren't random. They were curling into a massive loop around the clearing, etching nothingness into the world. Liam staggered to his feet, one arm hanging limp from the shoulder. We break it? We break it, Evie said, pointing at the pulsing light deep inside the hollow's face. The creature lunged again. Liam took its attention, swinging his spear in wide arcs, each strike buying her seconds. Evie charged low, ducking under a swipe that shredded the very bark from a tree. Her boots hit the slippery moss and she slid under the hollow's chest, slashing upward with the spindle knife. The blade struck the void. A hum turned into a shriek. In her head, in her bones, in the ground itself. The hollow convulsed. Shadows rippling outward like a stone dropped into dark water. Liam bellowed and drove the spear forward again, this time burying it deep into the light. A burst of searing white erupted, cutting through the mist like sunlight burning fog. The hollow's scream shattered into static. Its form broke apart, chunks of shadow peeling away and dissolving. The mist receded, and the half-formed circle collapsed into nothing. Evie fell to her knees, ears ringing. Liam leaned on his spear, breathing like he'd run for miles. The root's voice came again. Quiet now. You have stopped it. For today. But the hollow is not gone, it remembers. They didn't speak for a while, as the forest around them was quiet. Too quiet. As though even the insects had agreed not to draw attention to themselves. Liam finally broke the silence. That wasn't just a random attack. Evie nodded slowly. It was holding something. My memory. Our memory. That's why it came. The roots stirred under her skin, a subtle warmth that almost felt like a heartbeat. Not just yours, it murmured. It hunts threads of power woven into certain moments. Moments where choices bend the world. Liam crouched beside her, resting the broken spear across his knees. What choice, Evie? Hesitated. The night I first crossed over, before the kingdom fell, her mind tugged at the edges of that memory. A glimmer of silver bridges, laughter from the palace balcony, Mira's voice telling her, "Don't look back." She remembered the sharp snap of something breaking, and then darkness. Liam caught her expression. "You saw something important, something it wants." "No," Evie said, the word trembling in her throat. "Something it needs." Branches rustled overhead, not wind. Footsteps, light and deliberate. Liam shifted, scanning the tree line. From the shadows stepped a figure wrapped in a deep green cloak, face hidden. In their hands they carried a small wooden box bound with iron. The air around it seemed heavier, as though gravity pulled harder there. "You shouldn't be here," the stranger said in a voice low and musical. "The hollow scent is fresh. It will return for the rest." Evie rose to her feet, eyes locked on the box. "What's in there?" The stranger tilted their head. "A piece of what it took from you." Her pulse quickened. "Then give it back." A faint smile curved beneath the shadow of the hood. "Not yet. You'd burn alive trying to hold it without the others." "Others?" Liam asked. The stranger stepped closer, the moss wilting under their boots. 6 pieces in total, scattered across places you've been and places you've yet to step. The hollow will find them eventually. The question is, will you find them first? Evie felt the roots pulse deepen, like a drumbeat in her chest. "This is the weave," it whispered. "It begins now." Somewhere beyond the trees, the faint, wet clicking began again. The moment the hollow's shadow swept over the clearing, the air turned cold and sharp, as though the trees themselves were holding their breath. Evie's heart pounded in her chest, each beat like a drum urging her to run. The cloaked stranger grabbed her wrist and pulled her away from the flickering lantern light. Deeper into the forest's twisting paths, branches shifted as if alive, closing behind them, weaving a green and brown wall to slow their pursuer. But the hollow was not bound by wood or stone. It slipped through gaps, as if it were made of smoke. "Don't look back," the stranger warned. His voice was calm, but Evie could hear the tension beneath it. "It feeds on your fear." Liam darted ahead, his wings blazing with golden light, guiding them through a maze of roots and mossy bridges. The forest changed with every step, paths warped, streams bent in unnatural angles, and giant mushrooms unfolded like parasols to shield them from the hollow's creeping mist. At last they stumbled into a wide glade lit by silver moonlight. In the center stood an ancient stone archway covered in glowing runes. The air shimmered within it as though it were a mirror reflecting another world. Evie caught her breath. "What is that?" The stranger lowered his hood. For the first time, she saw his face-sharp features, eyes the color of amber and faint, translucent wings folded tightly behind him, a crossing. "Between here and where you came from, but you're not," Evie began. "I am," he interrupted, a faint smile curving his lips. I was human once, until the forest claimed me. Now I'm here to make sure it doesn't claim you the wrong way." Before she could answer, the hollow poured into the glade, its form towering above them, swirling black mist studded with eyes like molten gold. It hissed, a sound like wind tearing through dead leaves, and surged forward. Liam flew upward, releasing a burst of golden dust that burned the hollow's edges, but it only recoiled briefly before reforming. The stranger stepped in front of Evie, drawing a thin blade etched with the same runes as the arch. "Run through the crossing," he commanded. "I can't just leave you. You must." The 6 pieces are not objects. They are moments, scattered in time. The hollow consumes them, erases them from existence. You are the only one who can gather them. Evie's pulse roared in her ears. The forest, the fairies, the magic kit was everything she had dreamed of, and yet the pull of her own life tugged at her chest. The hollow lunged. The stranger met it with a flash of steel, their clash sending ripples through the glade. Liam swooped down and grabbed Evie's arm, pulling her toward the arch. "Go," he cried. She hesitated for only a heartbeat, then stepped through. Cold light swallowed her. When she opened her eyes, she was standing at the edge of a familiar dirt path, the forest behind her, silent and still. No fairies, no glowing archway. Only the moon above, watching in silence. Evie walked home in a daze, clutching the memory of golden wings and shifting trees. She knew the hollow was still out there. She knew the stranger's fight was not over. And deep inside, she knew she would return, because the forest had chosen her. And the forest always calls its chosen back.